Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Julio Himede from Beauty and the Beast, a 30th celebration, a wonderful production designer. And this specific presentation really opens up the story of Beauty and the Beast to be performed in a lot of new ways and new styles. So I was curious, where did you first go for inspiration? What was the first thing that inspired you for this?
Well, first and foremost, watching the movie. um, I think we've all seen the movie many years ago. So I think the first step for me and my team at Yellow Studio was to watch the movie quite a few times, over and over again. And then after that, we kept listening to the soundtrack, the music, because the music is so powerful. I think is probably one of my favorite Disney soundtrack, I will say, from any of their films. So, and I think, like when you're designing a play or an opera, the all the answers are in the script. And so for us, we had the film to go to and we had the music to go to. So we got a lot of ideas and inspiration just by listening to the music and watching the film.
I think, there's the main playing space, but before we get there, you have this amazing opening sequence with the song Belle that takes place before we even get there outside. And there's all of these black and white set pieces and props as if they're from the hand-drawn animation. Where did that
Yes.
concept come from?
Well, we very early on we decided with our directors John Shu and Hamish Hamilton that we wanted to celebrate the art and the craftsmanship created for the film by its animators and all the artists who collectively produce a Disney masterpiece. And so that celebration and of their artistry, of their hand sketches, and there were thousands and thousands of sketches made. That gave us the idea to create a world that celebrated, pencil sketches and the idea of drawing by hand. And so that opening scene of Belle is a transition from the narrator talking about this story, going into Belle. We see Belle for the first time in a real costume, and then the world around her is this black and white sketch form of paper, ink, charcoal, and pencil. And so all the characters and all the sort of elements and specific set vignettes that she goes through sort of celebrate that pencil hand sketch idea. Slowly we start to introduce a bit of color, and by the time we get to the final piece of that specific song and that number, we reveal the full spectrum in color. So we go from this very black and white kind of palette to the full color. So it's about celebrating the craftsmanship of the animators and the artists who work on the film.
Yeah, it was great to watch that transition as it explodes into color. And those, it's not just small props that were those black and white elements. There's a piano for Alan Menken. There's the truck bed that that H.E.R gets on. How long did all that take? Because there's so many pieces to that number.
It took, it was one of the most complicated scenes in the entire live action piece that we did. And we proposed the idea of Alan Menken to be sitting on a black and white, sketch piano. And we didn't think he would go for it, but he embraced the idea. And it was such an honor to have Alan Menken there, by the way. But it took about 3 or 4 months to sort of get all the pieces together. And it took quite a lot of rehearsal, to have all those different points, synchronized within the song. And so by the time we get to, Alan Menken, and he's there in a piano surrounded by this black and white world, and we see our Belle coming in, it was such a beautiful moment. And it does a lot of effort that obviously you don't see. in the finished product. But it was one of the most complicated, challenging scenes that we did. Also, because it was one of those scenes outdoors. Most of our scenes happen indoors, with a lot of large-scale props as well and set pieces. And this was specifically outdoors, so we also had to rely on, weather and so on in LA.
Not an easy feat. But when you do move indoors, as we talked about, that kind of explosion of color that goes across, there's those three massive arches at the top of the stage that change throughout the show to set the scene. And sometimes they're translucent, sometimes they're, have a whole facade on them. Can you talk about where that concept was from and how you use those?
Yeah, sure. Well, again, I go back to our script, watching the film, and the metaphor of the film, which is basically don't be fooled by the outer beauty and always try to dig in to the inner beauty. And so based on that metaphor and that message of the film, we decided to base our design around materiality. And by that, I mean, we found these specific see-through gauzes, some material that will allow us to conceal and reveal different moments of our story and different scenes through this material, through our set. And that was a nice narrative for us to tie it in with the metaphor of the story, I guess. We also play with lighting and projection to project images through those archways. But that was the inspiration, basically. And so that kind of, reveal and conceal, we kept playing with that throughout the entire time, every time we were in this sort of ballroom of these ghost-like archways. It's interesting because going back to the inspiration that you asked me earlier, we also, as part of our design research, we went down to the Rococo period, because the actual, the story is set in 1700s France, and specifically the Rococo period, which is very rich, fully decorated, beautiful interiors that are over the top, lots of gold and pastel colors. But with the archways that you pointed out specifically, we were inspired by the overall silhouette of Rococo, but we stripped away all the, heavy decor and richness of that period. And we created these sort of grand scale silhouettes, but in a very ghostly, clean, minimal sort of architecture, sort of very clean architecture that does touch on the Rococo, but it's in a very ghostly kind of see-through sort of aspect.
Mm. And when you are using the projection on those gauzes, how do you decide how detailed you get to be in a scene? Because there's some scenes that are incredibly busy, there's lots of dancers, and others, are a bit more, just a few people. How does that affect what you're projecting on the back?
Well, it has a huge effect, and we had up to, I think, 17 projectors for this particular space, because we call this area the 360 space, and it wasn't quite 360, but it was almost 270 degrees. And because of the scale of these archways and the fact that we also had layers of audience integrated in the archways and around 270 degrees, we had to be very precise in where the projectors actually hit. So not only at the front, but also on the sides of on the side of the archways and from the top and so on. So, but at the same time, we wanted, to be able to, in certain scenes of the show, to be able to see the audience behind our gauzes, right? And I go back to that conceal and reveal concept. And so the projection had to, I guess, balance what we did, so that we didn't take over necessarily, but we always saw that kind of silhouette of a person sitting behind the gauze by using that projection. So it was complicated, and there was a lot of, technical people involved that are much more clever than I am.
Well, I think probably one of the most technical scenes I saw was Beauty and the Beast. Or, sorry, not Beauty and the Beast. Be Our Guest, wrong B song. Because there's so many dancers, and it opens with that table piece with the
Yes.
hands popping out to manipulate. And with that table, I would think it would be hard to even construct that before you know what stage pictures they're looking for, what the
Yeah.
choreography is. So what was it like? Did you have to
Yeah.
work in tandem with
Yeah.
choreographers with that?
Yeah. And in fact, that was one of the first developments that we did between the choreographers and the directors, and we wanted, there's been so many wonderful versions done in some of the other films that we've seen since the original Beauty and the Beast, through animation, through special effects. And so how do we create something unique that is not relying on special effects necessarily, because this is a live action production? So the idea of puppetry through the table was something that we landed very quickly early in the process. So that was, I guess, the easy part. The complicated part is how to do it and how to hire up to 25, dancers slash puppeteers underneath this table in a way that feels very light and full of movement, and the table can dance, and the plates can come up, and hands and forks. It was complicated, and we spent a lot of time in the rehearsal room, with the choreographers, with the dancers, with cameramen, with our art directors, just finessing the table, finessing the holes where the hands come up through the table. It was challenging, but in the end, it's probably one of the most exciting scenes that we have, because it's very unique, and we haven't seen, that I guess a interpretation like that done for Be Our Guest. By the way, it's one of my favorite songs in the whole production.
Well, was this a movie that you had, a story that you had a personal connection to before coming in? Were you adding elements that meant something to
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I like I said, I love the music. I've always loved the music, and I've been very close to the films that Howard Ashman created. And so and Alan Menken, who created the music. So I think it was very special when I got asked to come on board and sort of create the design, because I admire the music, I admire the designs, all the other films that have been done that have been inspired by the original film. So I guess, as designers, you are excited for this creative challenge, but how do you create something that respects the original film, especially when we're doing a 30th celebration? It's not just me redesigning the entire film. We are celebrating what was done 30 years ago. But how do you take that and create your own spin on it that feels a bit more contemporary, perhaps, and a bit more modern, but celebrates this wonderful music? And again, I go back to celebrating the craftsmanship that was done. So it was a very special moment when I got the call.
Yeah. Well, celebration seems to be something you're great at, because you work in this kind of realm of big live shows, award shows. You have a Emmy nomination for doing the Grammys design. What is it about that kind of event and this realm of design work that really connects with you?
It might sound very cliche, but I think it's the music. I think 90% of the productions that I design and that I get involved with my team all revolve around music, whether it is Billie Eilish, or whether it is Belle, or whether it is an opera. It's all driven by music, and I think it's something really emotional that we respond to. And I think as designers, it's a creative challenge to be able to match that emotion through a design language. So I think for me, that's something that keeps me going. And I'm very fortunate to have landed all these jobs that are driven by music.
Mm. Well, it worked out wonderfully. It certainly brought the music to life this time around. So, Julio, thank you so much for chatting Beauty and the Beast with me, and for everyone who's watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. Stay with us. Thanks, Julio, once again.
Thank you for your time. All the best.